Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the small town of Maplewood, the gentle rustle of trees seemed at odds with the stark reality of the crime that had shaken the community to its core. Nestled amidst the rolling hills and crystal-clear streams, Maplewood had always been a refuge, a place where doors remained unlocked and neighbors exchanged pleasantries. Yet, the echoes of laughter that once filled the streets had been silenced by fear. Rumors and whispers circulated like cold drafts, penetrating the walls of even the sturdiest homes. A single gunshot had shattered the tranquility of a fateful Saturday afternoon, sending shockwaves through the tight-knit community. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they found the lifeless body of 42-year-old Sarah Milner sprawled across her front porch. Her warm, inviting home had transformed into a chilling crime scene, permanently altering the sense of safety that once enveloped the neighborhood. As news spread, disbelief mingled with dread, ushering in a suspense that would linger for months. Detective Laura Haynes, an experienced investigator with a reputation for unraveling complex cases, was summoned to lead the investigation. Stepping through the yellow police tape that flapped gently in the breeze, she surveyed the scenic, well-kept lawn, contrasting sharply against the stark reality of death. With every detail meticulously examined, she understood that each clue might lead to answers, to uncovering who had robbed Maplewood of its carefree spirit. The town braced itself. Questions loomed thick in the air, and the shadows of uncertainty began to fall in every corner. Justice was a murky path, and it was one that Laura was determined to traverse. The victim. Sarah Milner was, by all accounts, the heart of Maplewood. A local librarian, she had dedicated her life to fostering a love for reading in the community and organizing events that brought residents together. Children eagerly anticipated her storytelling sessions, where her animated voice filled the air, breathing life into the words of classic tales. Her kindness was a thread that wove families and friendships together, her laughter echoing through the hallowed halls of the library. Her husband, Tom, a high school history teacher, was a quiet man who balanced Sarah's exuberance with thoughtful introspection. Together, they were one of those couples that encapsulated the ideal vision of small-town life. Friends described them as inseparable, often seen strolling hand in hand through the farmer's market or aiding in local charity drives. The two had a young daughter, Lily, just 8 years old, who was the apple of their eye. For Sarah, every moment spent teaching her daughter, whether it was baking cookies or reading by the fireplace, was a treasure. On the day of her death, Sarah had planned to host a small gathering in her home for a book club meeting, something she had looked forward to all week. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she prepared snacks, her excitement bubbling over like the pot of coffee brewing in the kitchen. But as dusk approached, the scene shifted ominously as the festival of warmth and community crumbled into despair. Reflecting on Sarah's life, Detective Haynes understood that this investigation was not merely a process of piecing together evidence. It was about honoring the woman who had touched so many lives. Each family member and friend interviewed held a fragment of Sarah's vibrant spirit, reminding her that the echoes of a life lived shouldn't be easily forgotten, nor the truth obscured. The crime scene. Detective Laura Haynes approached the crime scene with careful precision, The yellow tape marked the boundaries of chaos at the Milner residence, but it could not contain the murmur of grief that pulsed through the air. As she stepped onto the porch, the weight of gravity pressed down on her chest. This was not just a job. It was a mission to unravel the darkness that had invaded a beloved family's life. The porch bore the remnants of a normal evening gone abruptly wrong. A half-finished glass of iced tea sat on the wooden table, condensation pooling beneath it, time caught in a fragile bubble, now shattered. Specks of dirt were smeared across the railing, evidence of a struggle intertwined with the pristine surroundings. A pair of frayed slippers lay abandoned, indicating Sarah had likely been caught unaware. Her day interrupted by a violent act. Forensic teams worked diligently, documenting every detail envisioned through the lens of tragedy. They scattered about with tools, methodically collecting potential evidence. A small shard of glass, a discarded cigarette butt, and even an old leaf that seemed out of season. Each item, a potential link in the chain that could lead them to the perpetrator, held the stark possibility of exposing the truth. As she scanned the area, Haynes noticed the trees lining the street, their branches swaying with an unsettling grace, almost like they were whispering secrets of what had transpired. The light from a fading sun cast long shadows, painting a gripping contrast between the vibrancy of the setting day and the dark event that had just unfolded. She felt the uneasy eyes of neighbors peering through drawn curtains, their paranoia palpable, as if they too were searching for answers among the swirling uncertainties. This was not merely a crime scene. It was a window into the life of a woman who had nourished her community. If justice had a rhythm, then Haynes was determined to find it every heartbeat whispering the need for resolution. The early investigation. As night fell over Maplewood, the somber mood hung heavily in the air, curling like tendrils of mist. Detective Haynes gathered her notes and stepped away from the scene, her mind racing through the initial fragments of information. A phone call to the local precinct had set the wheels in motion for an immediate investigation, mobilizing officers, detectives, and forensic analysts. The following morning brought a somber sun that barely broke through the clouds as Haynes gathered her team for a briefing. In a small, unadorned conference room at the precinct, she laid out the details they had unearthed so far. Eyewitness reports suggested they had seen a dark sedan parked near the Milner home earlier in the day, but descriptions were vague, shrouded in uncertainty. "Let's re-interview neighbors," she instructed, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Someone must have seen something," she emphasized, the importance of capturing the emotions still raw in the aftermath of the crime. Each witness was a puzzle piece in the broader picture, and she needed to ensure every lead was explored thoroughly. Breaks in routine had already begun to manifest in the community. Families began to keep windows shuttered as uneasy conversations about safety replaced friendly chatter. Detective Haynes, understanding the weight of her task, reached out to Sarah's close friends and colleagues. Each one offered a glimpse into Sarah's world, her passions, her aspirations, and even her fears. It became increasingly clear that Sarah's life was unblemished, characterized by personal and professional fulfillment. Yet, during the interviews, an incidental comment from one of her library aides hinted at Sarah's recent tensions regarding a new public policy on funding for community programs. Was there a connection? Could this unexpected source of stress have triggered someone's anger? As she jotted down her thoughts, Haynes couldn't shake the feeling of pressure enveloping her, the urgent need for resolution. Not only for the sake of justice, but for the community that needed to heal. The dead ends. Days melted into weeks as the investigation pressed on. But with each passing moment, the weight of frustration became more palpable. Detective Haynes had pieced together a timeline filled with potential leads, yet with each line drawn on her carefully crafted board, the clues grew distant, like mirages fading in the early morning light. The initial witness statements started to lose their impact. Several neighbors reported seeing the dark sedan, but descriptions varied from a mid-sized sedan to an SUV, leaving the police with nothing concrete to pursue. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses yielded little more than blurry images of vehicles passing by, each clip a tantalizing reminder of the killer's elusiveness, rather than a solution. As days turned to nights, Haynes found herself scrutinizing records of Sarah's correspondence. The letter she exchanged with colleagues revealed a woman dedicated to her craft, but they divulged nothing sinister or suspicious. All roads seemed to lead her back to dead ends, though she refused to relent. The community's desperation for answers began to morph into impatience. Rumors flourished like weeds in a garden, each one more outrageous than the last. Some whispered about past relationships. Others spoke of an unidentified stranger she had threatened to report. This chatter filled homes and coffee shops, but none of it produced any actionable intelligence. Weeks of tireless searching brought the cold sting of hopelessness creeping into the investigation's atmosphere. Haynes had to tread carefully, lest the investigation risked becoming a case study in futility. There was a lingering sense that maybe this case wasn't just about the crime itself. Perhaps it was a reflection of something deeper within the community, questions of why such love could coexist with such violence. And with every dead end, the journey toward understanding grew darker and more complex. As autumn's chill settled in, the trees shed their leaves, emptying their branches of vibrant life. This symbolized a transition for Maplewood. Was it merely a prelude to something unsettling? A break in the case. Just when the weight of hopelessness threatened to bury the investigation, a flicker of hope emerged from an unlikely source. It was a rainy Thursday evening when Detective Haynes received a call from Officer Martinez, a rookie cop assigned to patrol the outskirts of Maplewood. During a routine check, he had encountered a suspicious man lingering near an abandoned warehouse on the town's fringe. The man had been acting strangely nervously, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone that wasn't there. The encounter escalated when Martinez noticed a bulk in the man's jacket, a shape that could easily conceal a weapon. After a brief standoff, they had taken him in for questioning, and what followed was a series of revelations that could unravel the tightly knit fabric of Maplewood's crime. Interrogating the man, the officers learned his name was Danny Cole, a transient with a history of petty theft and substance abuse. He initially presented as evasive, but as Haynes pressed him gently, threading compassion with authority, the cracks in his facade began to show. Under the weight of the detective's calm yet persistent inquiries, he relented, revealing snippets of information about whispered conversations he'd overheard regarding Sarah Milner. He spoke of anger directed towards her passionate discussions about library funding dwindling, and how someone had threatened her for vocalizing those concerns. With each detail he reluctantly shared, Haynes felt an electric current ripple through. Could this be the connection they desperately sought? Driven by the details provided by Danny, Haynes pivoted her investigation towards a group of disgruntled town residents who had felt marginalized by recent policy shifts. Were they capable of violence? The night air thickened with tension as new leads sharpened her focus, pushing back against the shadows of doubt. For the first time in weeks, there was movement, a sense of urgency, igniting within the precinct. A hunt was underway, and with each revelation, the path to justice grew clearer, emboldened by the pulse of renewed determination echoing through the halls of the police station. The suspect. With a new lead in hand, Detective Haynes began to piece together an unsettling portrait of the town's simmering tensions. The residents Danny referred to were known among the community notorious. A handful of them had been vocal in their disapproval of Sarah's efforts to advocate for library funding, but one name stood out among the rest: Greg Larson, a disgruntled former town councilman. Greg had always bristled at the prospect of change, his anger boiling over as new policies were drafted. Haynes arranged for her team to gather information about Larson's whereabouts, focusing on his recent activities and connections. A meticulous examination of his social media presence revealed a pattern that resonated loudly with the frustration Danny described. Posts about the library's wasteful spending and veiled threats about taking action against those who prioritize frivolities over real community issues raised her suspicions. On a rainy afternoon, she decided to pay Greg a visit. His home was a modest two-story house on the outskirts of Maplewood, an unkempt yard establishing a stark contrast to the well-manicured surroundings typical of the area. As she approached the front door, her senses heightened. What would she find inside? Would he comply with her inquiries, or would he harbor the same hostility that had once led to his political downfalls? After a few forceful knocks, Greg opened the door. An incredulous frown etching his features. The tension pulsed between them, the atmosphere thick with unspoken word. As she introduced herself and expressed her purpose, she witnessed a flicker of recognition wash over his face. "Is this about Sarah Milner?" he asked, maintaining a tone that bordered on casual to casual for comfort. The barely concealed hostility simmered just under the surface, an unsettling indication of what could lie beneath. Haynes pressed on, her questions dissecting his alibi for the day in question. While he attempted to assert his innocence with practiced ease, his agitated demeanor and evasion told a different story. As voice recordings crackled quietly in the background, recording every word, she knew she was closing in. It was not a lot. It was not just the words exchanged. It was the atmosphere. A storm brewing between two individuals caught in the eye of a growing friction or confrontation that held the potential to change everything. The trial. The courtroom buzzed with a palpable tension as the trial for Greg Larson commenced. On one side sat the prosecution, determined to unravel the layers of animosity and motive that had culminated in the tragic demise of Sarah Milner. On the other side, Greg, the accused, appeared strangely composed, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed a hidden turbulence. Detective Haynes had worked tirelessly, alongside prosecutors, to assemble a case grounded in the evidence collected and Nicole's testimony would serve as the cornerstone. Moments captured in angry outbursts on social media reinforced the narrative of a man consumed by bitterness. Footage of the dark sedan seen near Sarah's home would also play a crucial role, aligning the timeline with Greg's move. As the trial unfolded, the atmosphere grew thick with emotion. Sarah's family sat in the front row, their eyes shadowed with loss. They had carried the weight of grief, while now bearing witness to the betrayal that had stolen their loved one from them. Friends and community members filled the courtroom, a tapestry of faces which had once reveled in Sarah's vibrant spirit, now knit tightly in solidarity against the violence that had thrust them into turmoil. Witnesses recounted their memory stories that revealed the woman Sarah had been. Each narrative about her warmth, kindness, and devotion struck chords of sorrow and defiance against the darkness that had overshadowed her life. The prosecution painted vivid images of the moments leading up to the fateful day, a heated discussion at a community meeting, a shattered relationship, and unresolved anger brewed into a tragedy. Yet, nothing could prepare Haynes for the moment the defense presented its case. Greg's attorney argued feverishly, attempting to cast doubt upon Danny's credibility and framing Greg as a scapegoat. The courtroom held its breath as he depicted the town's desperation to find a resolution, suggesting they may have latched on to the most convenient target in their anger. Haynes felt the weight of her role in those. The truth was not just buried in evidence. It was in the echoes of thousands of conversations, laced with grief and hope. The trial had become a crucible, testing not just the strength of the case, but the very fabric of a community that had suffered too deeply. As the final arguments neared, a sense of closure loomed. Though the outcome remained uncertain, justice lay in the hands of a jury, their deliberation poised to either bring solace or haunt them, all indefinite. The aftermath. The jury's decision reverberated through the small town of Maplewood like a thunderclap. When the verdict was finally read, the murmur of disbelief swept over the crowded courtroom. Greg Larson was found guilty of murder. A wave of relief and sorrow washed over Sarah's family, entwined like the threads of a tapestry constructed from grief and hope. They held tightly to one another, the ache in their hearts stinging just a bit less. Still, they understood that no verdict could restore what had been lost. As weeks turned into months, the ripples of the trial spread throughout the community. Maplewood had always prided itself on being a sanctuary, a quaint town unscathed by the horrors that plagued larger cities. But the threads of comfort had frayed. Conversations grew wary. Neighbors encountered one another with hesitant greetings, forever altered by the darkness they had faced. Detective Laura Haynes felt the echoes of her work in the hollow spaces left behind. The weight of justice delivered came intertwined with accountability, but it also conjured sadness for the loss of Sarah's vibrant presence that had nurtured the town. Each street she drove, each corner turned, sparked memories of laughter, smiles, and the warmth of community gatherings. She grappled with her thoughts, reflecting on the dichotomy of justice and Lawson, all too familiar reminder of the fragility of life. In the months that followed, Sarah's library reopened, dedicated in her honor. The community rallied together to establish a scholarship in her memory, aimed at assisting local students pursuing degrees in literature and education. Each book placed on the shelves served as a living testament to her legacy, held in each child's eager embrace and cherished forever. As autumn descended into winter, Maplewood slowly began to heal. Stitch by stitch, they lit candles in Sarah's memory, illuminating the town square with hope during long, dark nights. Laura Haynes found solace in these moments, a persistent reminder of the thousands of lives woven together through kindness and shared grief. Yes, they had faced violence, but they would emerge stronger, poised to rebuild the world that Sarah Milner had cherished and defended. her story would not be forgotten. Instead, it would inspire those who still wore the weights of their sorrow, lighting their path forward with a resilience that would safeguard their community against the darkness that once threatened to engulf it. Reflection. Months after the verdict, Detective Laura Haynes found herself sitting on a weathered bench overlooking the serene waters of Maplewood Lake. The water shimmered underneath a gentle sun, yet the surface hid deep currents lingering beneath, each ripple echoing memories of the investigation that had shaken the town to its foundation. As she stared into the horizon, Haynes reflected on the complexity of justice. The gavel had smashed down decisively, but it had also marked the end of a journey shadowed by grief. Familias were fractured, and a once vibrant life was extinguished. Yet out of the ashes had risen a new commitment among the townspeople to rebuild the community they cherished. The scholarship and the reopening of the library were victories but hollow reminders of the reality they faced. Sarah Milner's laughter would no longer fill the hallways, and her warm presence would forever be missed. Still, Haynes made a promise to carry Sarah's legacy forward. Her mission to protect the powerless was forged anew from the ashes of despair. Each incident was a spiritual lesson etched in time, a reminder that in the face of evil, love could prevail. And perhaps, as the seasons changed, Maplewood would not only remember but reaffirm the bond that connected them all, guiding them to a brighter future.